In the autumn skies over Europe, 1944, the world was changing. The old rules of air combat, the dogfights fought by piston engines and propellers, were about to meet something entirely new. It began quietly, almost unnoticed. 5 Royal Canadian Air Force Spitfires on a patrol near the Netherlands, flying high and relaxed after a long morning. The pilots scanned the clouds, the soft hum of Merlin engines filling their cockpits. Then, out of the haze, something silver sliced through the sky, so fast, so unnatural, it almost looked unreal. For a brief second, the formation broke, eyes widened, hands gripped the stick tighter. "What the hell was that?" one pilot called over the radio. No one answered immediately. They had just witnessed something no Allied airman had ever seen before. The world's first operational jet fighter, the Messerschmitt Me 262. That moment changed everything. The Me 262 wasn't just another aircraft. It was a glimpse into the future. Its twin Jumo 004 turbojets howled like nothing else, a new kind of scream that split the air. Compared to the piston-driven planes that had ruled the skies for decades, the Me 262 was almost alien. It could fly more than 100 miles per hour faster than any Allied fighter, climb higher and dive harder. To Allied pilots, it felt like facing a phantom. One moment it was distant, the next it was gone, leaving only a faint silver trail against the clouds. But with speed came fragility. Those Jumo engines, marvels of engineering and desperation, were temperamental beasts. Each one lasted barely 25 flight hours before burning out, and they drank fuel like fire. Germany, starved of resources, was building machines that could win battles, but not the war. Still, for the men who flew against them, none of that mattered. To them, the Me 262 was death with wings. As reports spread through Allied airfields, disbelief turned to anxiety. Pilots gathered in mess halls, whispering about the new German jet. "It climbs like a rocket," one would say. "Can't even touch it in a dive," said another. Commanders pored over intelligence briefings, trying to find answers. How do you fight an enemy that can outrun your bullets? But as they would soon discover, speed alone was not invincibility. The Me 262 was revolutionary, but flawed. It needed long, smooth runways for takeoff, and those engines took precious minutes to spool up to power. Allied reconnaissance learned this quickly. Every jet that took off or landed was vulnerable. The Allies began to adjust tactics. Fighters were ordered to patrol near German airfields, waiting for the jets to rise or return. They called it rat-catching. It was dangerous, almost suicidal. German flak batteries surrounded those air bases, but it was effective. The only way to beat the jet was to strike it before it could fight back. Among those who dared to try was Lieutenant Urban Drew, a P-51 Mustang pilot from Detroit. His aircraft bore the name Detroit Miss, and on a cold October morning in 1944, Drew and his squadron took off to hunt jets near Achmer Airfield. As they descended through thin clouds, Drew spotted movement, two Me-262s on final approach, their landing gear extended, vulnerable. He dove hard, throttles full forward, the Merlin engine screaming. Tracers stitched the air. One jet erupted into flame, the other veered sharply, smoke trailing from its wing. Drew's wingman shouted, "You got 'em, both of them." It was the first confirmed destruction of two Me-262s in a single sortie. But even then, victory didn't come easy. Allied gun cameras often failed to record the hits, and without photographic proof, pilots waited months for confirmation. Drew's achievement wasn't officially recognized until nearly 40 years later, when declassified German records confirmed both kills. He was awarded the Air Force Cross in 1983, proof that courage never expires. Yet while some pilots found glory, most found only frustration. The Me-262s struck fast, often from high altitude, shredding bomber formations before the escorting fighters could react. A single pass from its four 30-millimeter cannons could tear a B-17 apart. The Luftwaffe called them Sturmvögel, storm birds, and in those final months of 1944, they brought terror to the skies above Germany. Still, even the storm birds couldn't turn the tide. Fuel was scarce, runways were bombed daily, and every sortie risked destruction before the wheels even left the ground. The jet age had arrived, but too late for the Reich. Meanwhile, across the Channel, the Allies studied every encounter, every wreck, every scrap of intelligence. They knew the next war, if it ever came, would be fought by jets, and they were already preparing their answer. The winter of 1944 bled into the bitter dawn of 1945, and the skies over Germany were colder, thinner, more dangerous than ever. By then, the Allies had learned the habits of the Me-262. They knew when the jets rose, where they landed, how long those trembling Jumo engines needed to spool before liftoff. Every morning, somewhere over the crumbling Reich, fighters climbed into the pale sky, waiting to strike the moment the stormbirds showed themselves. It was during one of these hunts that a young American pilot named Chuck Yeager made history. Yeager, barely in his 20s, already carried the calm confidence of a man who understood both the thrill and terror of flight. His P-51D Mustang, glamorous Glenn III, shone like polished silver against the gray of winter. He had heard the stories, of course. The jet that could outrun anything, the ghost that could appear and vanish before a man even fired a shot. But Yeager was not the kind of pilot to be intimidated by stories. That day, he and his squadron were patrolling near Achmer when they spotted two dots far below, Me-262s returning to land. The jets were fast, but not invincible, and Yeager saw his chance. He rolled his Mustang into a dive, the altimeter spinning as the wind screamed past his canopy. The jets, caught low and slow, tried to reach the safety of the runway, but it was too late. Yeager's tracers found the lead aircraft, one burst of flame, a plume of smoke, and the world's most advanced fighter crashed just short of its home field. It was the first confirmed jet kill for the 8th Air Force, and it proved that even the future had weaknesses. The Allies learned quickly. The Me-262 was unstoppable in the air, but fragile on the ground. Pilots like Yeager, Drew, and countless others began targeting the jets as they took off or landed, forcing the Luftwaffe into a deadly dilemma: fly from heavily defended bases or risk being destroyed before the fight even began. The Germans called the Allied patrols Jagdflieger gegen Jets, fighter hunters of the jets, and for every new Me-262 that reached the front, another was lost before it ever fired a cannon. The Luftwaffe tried everything to protect its precious machines. Airfields were surrounded by walls of flak guns, airstrips were camouflaged, decoy runways built in nearby fields. Some jets were hidden in barns, rolled out only moments before takeoff. Yet no matter how they tried, Allied eyes were always watching, from the clouds above, from reconnaissance cameras, from the long shadows of every dawn. By February 1945, the jet units, GG-7, KG-51, and later the famed JV-44, were fighting against impossible odds. Their pilots were skilled, many veterans from the early days of the war, but their numbers were thin, their fuel thinner. Every flight was a gamble. For the men in the cockpit, the Me-262 was both a miracle and a curse. It could outrun the enemy, yes, but one bird strike, one engine surge, one hasty throttle push could tear the turbine apart. Many pilots never even made it to combat. They died on takeoff, engines exploding beneath them, their sleek machines crumbling into fire. Still, the Germans pressed on. Desperation breeds innovation, and from that desperation came boldness. They armed the Me-262 not just for air combat, but for assault, mounting racks of R-4M rockets under its wings, designed to tear apart bomber formations in a single devastating pass. When those rockets flew, the sky lit like fireworks, and the bombers, heavy and slow, could do nothing but pray. Crews of the 8th Air Force later recalled seeing the jets streak through their formations, gray streaks with bright flashes, followed by fire and falling metal. "They came like thunder," one gunner said, "and were gone before you could even swear." But the jets were few, and the bombers were endless. For every Me-262 that climbed into the sky, there were 100 Allied planes waiting. By March, the Luftwaffe's losses were unsustainable. Galland, now exiled from command for defying Goering, formed his own elite unit, JV-44, the Squadron of Experts. It was a final stand, composed of aces, veterans, and dreamers who refused to surrender the air. Their motto was whispered through the shattered hangars, Der letzte Schuss entscheidet, the last shot decides. They flew from southern Germany, using sections of the Autobahn as runways, taking off from straight stretches of road while mechanics and guards cleared civilians away. To protect their takeoffs and landings, Galland ordered a special group of Focke-Wulf 190s to circle overhead, painted bright red with white stripes. The Allies called them the Papageistaffel, the Parrot Squadron. Their colors mocked death itself, daring the enemy to strike. Even in defeat, the Me-262 remained terrifying. On April 10, 1945, a formation of B-17s heading toward Berlin was ambushed by over 20 Me-262s. Rockets and cannon fire tore through the bombers. Within minutes, 5 were down, more trailing smoke. Yet the jets could not stay long. Fuel ran out, ammunition spent, engines overheating. They vanished into the horizon, leaving behind only silence and drifting parachutes. By the end of April, the war was collapsing. Allied troops were on the Rhine. Soviet tanks were closing in from the east. Jet airfields lay in ruins, pocked with craters, lined with burnt husks of what had once been the most advanced aircraft in the world. The proud wings of the Luftwaffe were broken, scattered across the wreckage of a dying Reich. When Germany finally surrendered in May 1945, only a handful of Me-262s were still airworthy. Allied engineers rushed to capture them, studying every bolt, every rivet, every engine. They knew what they were holding was more than a weapon. It was the blueprint for a new age, the jet age. The P-80 Shooting Star, the British Meteor, and later the Soviet MiG-15, all of them carried the bloodline of the Me-262. The world had seen the future once through smoke and fire, and it would never look back. The Me-262 was not just a fighter, it was a warning, a glimpse of what humanity could build when desperation met brilliance. And though it came too late to save its nation, it changed the destiny of flight forever. When the smoke cleared and the engines went silent, the world stood on the edge of a new era. The propellers that had carried nations through war would soon give way to the whine of turbines, to speed beyond imagination. The Messerschmitt 262 had been born from desperation, built in secret factories under the shadow of defeat, flown by men who knew they were fighting a war already lost. Yet somehow, through that tragedy came transformation. The jet age had taken flight. Allied pilots who once feared the silver ghosts would later stand beside captured jets, marveling at the craftsmanship, the smooth metal, the brutal elegance. Engineers traced the lines of the fuselage and whispered, "This is the future." Within months, new jets took to the skies, P-80s streaking over California, meteors guarding the British coast, Soviet designers sketching the first MiG. In the ashes of war, the race for the skies was reborn. But for the men who lived it, for those who faced the Messerschmitt 262 in the freezing air of 44 and 45, it was never just about technology. It was about courage, the kind that pushes forward even when the odds are impossible, the kind that drives a pilot to dive through flak, to chase a blur of silver, knowing one mistake means death. Those moments, those hearts beating against the roar of the wind are what truly defined that time. Funny thing, time moves on, engines evolve, but stories never die. They stay, echoing in the sound of every jet that rips through the clouds today. Somewhere, maybe above the same skies once torn by war, a new pilot feels that same thrill, that same fear, that same wonder at what flight truly means. And if this story made you feel that wonder, if just for a moment you could see the sky the way they saw it, then stay with us. Tap that like button, subscribe to the channel, and help keep these stories alive. Because history only fades when we stop telling it. This has been the story of the Messerschmitt 262 and the brave souls who fought beneath its shadow. Thank you for watching, and until next time, keep your eyes in the sky.